Hi everybody, welcome to today's ISE webinar. We've got a really great informative session lined up for you as always. I'm really pleased to be doing this session in conjunction with our supplier partners Handshake. We do a lot of work closely with Handshake, great to have their support, and we've been doing some work, as most of you will know, this year in partnership with AGCAS in terms of looking at very much the future careers 2032. And today we're going to be focusing on employers and what are the challenges employers are facing and how do they see the future. Over the next hour, you're going to hear from Chris very shortly. You're also going to hear back from myself. I'll be doing a Q&A session with Karen Luckly-Tang, who's head of future talent at Legal & General, and Maria Donovan, recruitment director at Unlocked. But we also really want to make these sessions as interactive as possible. So please use the chat function, the Q&A, drop any comments or questions that you want to ask into there. We've definitely got time at the end of it where we'll come back to those. We always find that's a really useful and informative way to do things. We're also recording this so that actually if you miss anything, you'll be able to go back and catch up with it. And also you'll be able to pass it on to colleagues afterwards so that you can share the learnings with them as well. So we've got really great content. We've got lots of stuff to get through, so I suggest we crack on pretty quickly with the content. As I said, really pleased to be working with Handshake. We do a lot of work with Handshake, and we really value your support. Chris, I'm going to hand over to Chris Anthony, who's head of employer partnerships. Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, everyone. Good to kind of see you all virtually, and maybe I've seen some of you in person recently. We've been at quite a few events, but as Stephen mentioned, I look after employer partnerships here at Handshake as part of our UK and EMEA expansion. Today's conversation is all around our Graduate Employer Priorities Report 2023. So we're going to look at what the priorities are for employers, how employers are handling graduate recruitment in the next 12 months, what their challenges are right now, and what opportunities do they have to improve their outcomes immediately. So we're going to look at some of the key findings from the research, and hopefully we'll leave you with some practical examples of how you can apply them to your recruitment efforts in the coming year. We'll also take a look at the role technology can play in impacting some of these outcomes. So if you could go to the next slide, please, Lily, that'd be great. Just a little bit about Handshake before we crack on into some of the findings. Handshake is effectively the largest early talent network in the world. Our mission as a business is to increase access to opportunity for students. So we want the best students to have access to the best opportunities, regardless of who they know or where they might have studied. Handshake as a platform is a three-sided marketplace. So it brings together universities, students, and employers. Globally, what this equates to is about 1,400 university partnerships, about 10 million active students, and about 750,000 employers. Specifically within the UK and EMEA, our growth has been incredibly rapid. In just over a year, we've grown the network to 13,500 employers, as you can see on the screen, 24 university partnerships, and an active and growing student network of about 211,000 students. So that's a little bit about Handshake. If you go to the next slide, to go into some of the findings, we're going to look at the fierce competition employers are facing for some of the most qualified candidates and what today's graduate hiring landscape looks like. So first and foremost, one of the major findings for us was that the demand for graduates is increasing. It's on the up, 47%. So almost half of the organizations that we spoke to intend to increase their number of hires in the next 12 months. 50% will be maintaining their current level of employment when it comes to students and graduates. And only 3% of those employers are reducing their student and graduate hiring programs. Some of the reasons that we're seeing for employers that are hiring more grads in 2023, some of this growth is down to pent up pandemic demand. Obviously, there were pauses in hiring, there were freezes. This is all kind of building up now, i.e. the growth that's going to be ahead. But the majority of the companies that we spoke to are expecting some level of overall business growth and just need more hands on deck. And students and graduates is a great place to start for that. So as we know, demand for graduates is up. However, there is a bit of a concern when it comes to skills. 59% of the employers that we spoke to are concerned about the impact that COVID will have on skills of students. So over the last 2 years, graduate candidates have been prevented from gaining as much job experience due to COVID. So they're less likely to come fully equipped with the skills that they might need to thrive within graduate employment. And lots of employers have obviously identified this. 68% of the employers that we spoke to feel as though this is going to have an even bigger effect on candidates that come from marginalized backgrounds, which is then ultimately going to have repercussions on the equality of opportunity too. So these candidates that come from marginalized backgrounds will have less provision to build up experience via internships. They'll have less ability to leverage connections to get a foot in the door. So there is an expectation on employers to try and do more to bolster their level of support for these types of students. What can employers do to actually address this potential skill gap that's been created? So strengthening relationships with career professionals and engaging with students more regularly is probably the first step. We speak to lots of employers every day here at Handshake, and we're seeing these trends lay out over the coming months and years. Technology like Handshake can obviously support these types of interactions and processes, but just to go into a little bit more detail on some of the findings and from the employers that we spoke to, 65% of those employers want to strengthen their relationships with careers services, and 45% of the employers that we spoke to want to engage with students more regularly than at the end of their studies and kind of build out a continuous recruitment process when it comes to hiring students. The impact that this is going to have is that these early connections will establish stronger relationships with students throughout their learning journey. It's obviously a hyper competitive market, so having stronger relationships when you're recruiting is obviously going to help. Obviously, employers can influence what these students are learning if they're speaking to them sooner in their education journey. So this is going to impact the skills that they can gain as time goes by. So stronger relationships here in this market are better for everyone. Employers will get to meet the most talented candidates early. Universities are going to get to grips with the evolving career opportunities that are out there for students. And then students are going to have the opportunity to develop the skills they need to successfully enter the workforce. So strengthening relationships is a really good way to look at it. And then finally, just to end on one of the main priorities for employers, obviously we spoke around a lot of different themes. The key one here really, and this is front of mind as it should be and will be going forward, is that 97% of employers have put equality, diversity and inclusion as their top priority. It's front of mind for every business that we speak to, and it's absolutely something that's going to be focused on, and there are roles that technology can play in facilitating these types of relationships. So that's the last finding that I would talk about with regards to the report. I'll hand back over to Stephen now to go through some of the other employer priorities that we've seen.
Great, thanks, Chris. And just to reiterate, it's a really great piece of work, this report. So I really would encourage you to go and read the report in full, because there's a lot more detail in there that we can cover in a webinar. So what's happening with understanding employer priorities at the moment? Lily, do you mind moving on to the next slide? So demands for graduates, it is a complex picture out there, but overall we are seeing significant growth in the graduate market. The data from this report, the data from the work that the ISE has collated, data from everybody else that's sort of market commentators, as I'm sure we've all read, really shows strong demand for all types of hires, but particularly within early talent. Our industry is now recruiting at a higher level than it ever has done before. We are now well and truly above pre-pandemic levels of recruiting, which is great news, but it also explains why everybody's so busy and running so hot at the moment and having such challenges in terms of actually dealing with that market, getting the candidates through and reaching students. And that's something that when we talk to Maria and Karen, we'll get into a little bit more. So one of the things that we explored, what are the reasons for hiring more graduates? And the strongest reason by far is actually this experience, this expectation of growth. There is some element, that's the yellow chunk of the donut, which is actually catching up post-pandemic for some of the hiring that didn't happen. But actually it's very much this growth piece. And that comes out in some of the conversations that we have anecdotally as well. It's not just here in the numbers. And you'll see that actually some other bits of this graph, so graduates being good value, current shortfalls, this natural increase. And that is fundamentally this idea that actually organizations need early talent to fuel the growth of their organizations. If you think about organizations having a buy-in strategy, which is more lateral hiring, and early talent tends to fit into the grow and retain strategy. For a whole bunch of various reasons, there's a lot of tightness in the labour market, and I think that's here for the long term. It'll be interesting to see if actually over the next 6 months we have a few challenges due to the economic headwinds, but actually in the long run, due to low birth rates, due to Brexit, due to a whole bunch of other different factors, there are just basically a smaller number of people in the jobs market. So employers are having to focus much more on that grow and retain strategy, which of course is where our sector of the market comes in. And interestingly, actually, one of the things that obviously we talk about a lot is technology and technology changes. The sector I know very well is Big Four, that's my background. When I look at the numbers over the last decade, you'd think that things like offshoring, technology, reducing some of the labour input that's needed in certain roles would actually see to a decrease in hiring. That sector is recruiting more than it ever has. So I think that shows where changes in technology, particularly at our end of the market, which is more skills driven, actually employers need more of that skilled talent to deal with the more complex world. So that makes the whole world very much more challenging for us, but I think that's a very good sign for us as well, that this is an area that in the long run so we also had a look at actually the top priorities for employers. What is it happening amongst employers? What are they focusing on most of all? And again, the data on this matches what we're hearing in our conversations, and that is very much that top of the list is diversity. And that's very much diversity being a real not just an important part for organisations for a whole bunch of reasons around it's the moral thing to do, it's adjusting to the market, but actually a real focus on, are the numbers changing? Lily, I don't know if it's my screen, but I've not seen the next slide. That there we go, that's it. Which is that need to recruit more diverse candidates, but actually meaningfully make a difference to targets. So it's not enough just to talk about it, to be saying the right thing and have some good programs in place. Those programs actually aren't good enough if they're actually not delivering changing numbers. And really interesting reflecting back on our conference, which seems like a lifetime ago, it was only 2 or 3 weeks ago. Actually, almost every session, the conversation ended up on diversity, even if it started somewhere else. So the data in this report very much backs up those conversations. But also within that, you look at some of those other priorities, they all feed through into those twin needs, which is to recruit more people and actually make sure your intellects are diverse. So it's how do you connect with the right candidates? Lots of feedback that actually it's a real challenge at the moment, trying to understand what student wants, how they want to engage with employers, where they are with the market, challenges around that. And then actually using career services to very much strengthen those relationships and find better ways to work in the curriculum, but also to work with career services to find those candidates. Lily, can we go on to the next slide? So just before we move into the Q&A with Maria and Karen, just some kind of summary points in terms of actually what our recommendations are for employers recruiting graduates this year in this market. And the first of those really is around reaching students earlier in their learning journey. If you look back over the last decade or so, employers that are serious around recruiting early talent go much earlier in the pipeline now, working with people in their first year at university or even before they join university. So if you're not doing that, you should be aware that other employers are, and they are in effect taking candidates off the market through those early identification opportunities. So very much getting to students earlier in that learning journey. And I think that phrase learning journey is really important. It's about how do you integrate into campus life, into the academic experience, etc., etc. And that ties to this next point, which is about creating a ramp to early career for the individual. What we do as a sector, when you take it apart all the stakeholders, we transition people through education and into work. It's not a series of cliff edges. It's about how do we integrate the world of work and employment with university life, so that we can knit together all that we do. So we create those ramps through into early careers for individuals, and continue once somebody's joined. We are talking more and more about retention. Our job doesn't finish the minute somebody joins an organisation. People are still thinking about their careers. They're still going through a change process. So it's important that we think about that. And also at this point, we are still trying to understand what the world looks like post-pandemic. I don't think we have anything like a settlement in terms of actually how students, employers, universities are going to engage in the future. I think we're still working that out. So we've got to be really careful about that information overload. There's a huge amount of information of data out there. So we could talk about online fatigue, a whole bunch of other forces that might be symptoms around actually that information overload piece. So we've got to be really careful about that information piece. And of course, technology, the pandemic has made a step change in terms of how we use technology. So it is important to use technology to automate those less complex processes, information provision, making it a much better, much sharper candidate experience. Lots of employers say to me they are now using tech in a very different way to the way they did pre-pandemic, about creating stronger links, and also with a much broader range of universities. So really be thinking about that. And just finding using technology smartly is a better way of attracting and retaining those graduate hires. Yes, there's a transaction element to it, but actually what's the depth behind those systems and processes and platforms that you may be using, so you can build those relationships with candidates. My personal view is that is very much going to evolve over the next sort of 12 to 24 months as we get this post-pandemic settlement. So that's the news from the report. And I want to introduce our other two people that we'll be speaking today, and we've got a little bit of a Q&A planned with the three of us, and then just a reminder that we're going to a broader Q&A. I can see some numbers popping into the Q&A box, so we will definitely have time for questions at the end. But first of all, Maria and Karen, can I just get you to introduce yourselves? Maria, would you like to introduce yourself first and just let everybody know who you are, what you do, who you work for?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Maria Donovan. I'm the recruitment director at Unlock Graduates. So we run a leadership program where we recruit graduates to be prison officers and lead on the front line for 2 years, and also sit on the ISE board.
Thank you very much, Thank you, Maria. Karen, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hi everyone, nice to meet you. I'm Karen Luckly-Tang. I am Head of Future Talent at Legal and General. I'm still getting my head around it because it's week 4 after being at Deloitte for 6 years. So my knowledge of the LNG is a bit patchy, but it obviously more Deloitte. But in terms of who I am, I sit on the board also with Stephen and Maria. I also chair the finance sector group, so I recognise quite a few of you. So nice to see you. And in terms of types of students we recruit, quite well, finance related, actuarial, quite a lot of those, investment management, some accountants as well. So more on the finance side, and our numbers are around sort of all types of hiring, about 150 or so a year.
Thanks, both. So just to get stuck in some questions here, and if I can go to yourself, Maria, first. Can you just talk a little bit about sort of what your hiring objectives are? Does some of the things that the report showed around diversity, increasing targets, is that something that you can relate to with Unlocked?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've only been up and running for sort of 6 years. So kind of plan, like each year we sort of plan to grow a little bit, and sort of plans are to sort of grow a little bit more. We recruit at the moment 130 graduates each year for our cohort. And yeah, diversity is definitely a big focus, like in terms of representation across the prison system. So over a quarter of people in prison are from ethnic minority backgrounds, as an example, but only 8% of prison officers are. So part of the reason for our existence is to really increase the diversity from that angle. So we have quite clear targets around that, which we generally do hit, but it is something that we kind of want to increase year on year. And then in terms of sort of like broader diversity, we exist to kind of get people into a sector that is relatively unknown by the graduate population, and get people to consider it who wouldn't ordinarily go into it. So yeah, just kind of reaching out to sort of diverse range of students from different backgrounds, different subject backgrounds, who may not have thought about doing this, and that can obviously, that's a key part of our strategy each year, which can be a challenge, but it's also a real plus to sort of, I guess, reaching out to students who don't really know what they want to do as well, of which there are quite a lot.
Yes, there are, aren't there? Great, thanks for it. And the same to you, Karen. What are your sort of current? You talked about the areas that you are hiring into. What are those current objectives? Is that picture of numbers increasing something that you recognise?
Yeah, no, thank you. It is. I mean, numbers are growing. Obviously, smaller scale than maybe where I was, but yes, the numbers are growing. I expect to see a sort of 20 to 25% increase for the targets we're going out to the business at the moment. The biggest, I guess, the two reasons they hire students is one, diversity, but also to build the skills. So it's very, very apparent that now we can't continue to buy in skills at a more experienced level. It's too experienced, and so we don't have a tech program, for example, at the moment, but that is one that we're going to be launching this coming campaign, because we're just not recruiting that skill set at the junior end. So from a diversity perspective, absolutely key. I mean, I think there's an impression of maybe an insurance company and pensions company, and they really want to break away from that impression that people have. So there's a lot of work that we need to do in terms of attracting, a diverse workforce, which actually, having looked at the numbers, the team have done a really good job at that, but there's obviously more to do. But yeah, it's also about building a skill set that just it's too hard to attract at a more experienced level.
And Maria, just going over to how you foresee the future. Obviously, the pressures on your organisation will be different to the commercial pressures on something like Legal and General. Do you see that increasing demand for unlocked graduates amongst what are effectively your clients that you deliver?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's sort of like pros and cons, I guess, to sort of the next couple of years and what might happen. I think. Well, firstly, if there is a kind of recession, then that always plays into the hands of the public sector amongst the graduate population, and tend to do quite well out of that when people are looking for sort of stable, secure roles. The public sector does tend to become more popular. On the flip side of that, I think for us, and again, I think for a lot of roles in the public sector, they are not jobs that you can do remotely. And I think particularly with the sort of mentality amongst populations at the moment in terms of looking for like hybrid roles which they can do sort of partly in the office and partly from the comfort of their homes, like that's just not possible in these job roles, and certainly being a prison officer, like you've got to be there. So I think that is a sort of like new challenge that we're facing, but also I guess like differentiates those that are going to like really like thrive in the role compared to those who don't. So I think those are sort of key new challenges that we're facing.
And do you think the perception of students, you mentioned that I can't believe it's only 6 years since Unlocked founded it, so it feels longer, in a good way. Do you see those perceptions of students changing over time as well for the public sector? And do you think that that's something more broadly that we still need to work on as an industry?
I think it's still something to be worked on. I think like part of the challenge for us is obviously we were a relatively new brand, and then kind of hit pandemic, and so like there's a lot of work that we still need to do to like raise awareness about who we are and how we fit with that. I think there is still a lot to do around like misconceptions around like the public sector, around like kind of progression and prestige and salary amongst the student population, because actually a lot of those theories are unfounded and like actually not accurate. So I think there's a lot that can be done to address that, and a lot of the positives in terms of leadership and skills development that people can get from those roles. So yeah, I definitely think there's still more to be done, and to not just sort of like bucket people in terms of like being interested in that sector or not, because in theory, like I think everyone could or should be interested in it in some way, and like there's no reason why people can't do both in their careers as well in their lives, and like kind of do something frontline public sector followed by going into private corporate job if they wish to do so.
Right. But yeah, agreed. That's when you think about how many careers we're all due to have in our lifetimes. I think there'll be a lot more sort of movement between various sectors. Thanks, Maria. The same to you, Karen. What do you foresee the sort of the changes over the next sort of, I guess, sort of 1 to 2 years or so? Do you recognise that picture whereby just that increasing need for early talent as business gets more complex? Do you see the demand within your organisation for what you and your team do increasing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely do. I do think there's more education to be done, I think, with our business stakeholders in terms of seeing early careers as the only solution to their diversity, needs. And I think there's a lot of, I feel there's a lot of pressure on, well, we can get our diversity, well, not targets or quotas, but we can get a great base, and of course we will, and we're working hard towards that. But it needs to filter up the organisation, making sure the pastoral care there is, the support there, the environment is inclusive. So I think there's still some work to be done in my organisation around, great, we're getting really good diverse group of candidates in, but how are we going to support them? How are we going to retain them? So it's not just we've done the job and now it's done and the organisation is diverse. I think it's a really hand-in-hand piece. I think the other, I guess, challenge, again, that's sort of, I suppose, too unique where I am, is that I find the businesses work in silos and they don't look at talent as a total talent. They look at talent for their part of the organisation. But actually, to your earlier point, Stephen, actually people have lots of different types of careers, and you can have that in a large organisation. But the business needs to be open and receptive to that, to allow people to do that, and not, which will mean that these hires won't go somewhere else to get a great career. So I think there's a lot of work to do, obviously, in recruiting these candidates, but also how the organisations are transforming to support a very different audience that they are not used to yet. So I think, yeah, it's a big job, I think, all around, but it's not just focused on early careers teams, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I recognise that from my times in recruiting, that sometimes I think business is almost happier to see somebody leave than actually move to a different part of the organisation. There's it's beyond the scope of this webinar really, but there's some really interesting stuff out there that I've been reading recently around actually that need for organisations to understand that mobility of careers in and out of organisations and in between. I think, yeah, the organisations that get that right will have better relationships with their people. Yeah.
And I think, sorry to interrupt you, I think they need to recognise that they need to do that they need to adapt. I think there's still an expectation of the new hires will adapt, but actually we as an organisation need to adapt as well. Like, it is definitely a two-way process, and they need to be educated. Again, that's going to take a bit of time, I think, but that is the only way I think we're really going to retain top talent in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So we started to touch on this a little bit, and I've got a little eye on my monitor, seeing some of the questions starting to come through. And one of those questions already, actually, one of the first ones around challenges and connecting with students, employees on campus, not on campus. So that was my sort of my last sort of questioning strand for the two of you. So Maria, what are those challenges you're facing at the moment? Is it around how do you connect with students? Is it dealing with a very rapidly changing landscape? I don't know, what's the picture from Unlocked?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything really, no. But yeah, in terms of, I guess, like, I would say, like, definitely awareness amongst students that we exist and what the opportunities are that we offer, and making sure that we're getting out there, like, definitely really keen to get back out on campus and go to events, because, we do miss out on the kind of like passers-by that we used to meet, like at careers fairs, or just generally in passing, like on campus. And I think with everything online, students are more geared towards just searching for what they're already interested in, so that's been a challenge for us. So, like, just making sure that we can reach out to that broad audience, and yeah, just challenging those sort of misconceptions. And I think, like, one thing that, I mean, I may be wrong, but that I'm conscious of going back out on campus is just ensuring that the students are ready for that, and like kind of have the knowledge and the sort of are equipped with the skills to be able to, like, go and talk to strangers and network and things like that, because I'm conscious that they're also a generation that have spent the vast majority of their time in their education and exams behind a screen. So yeah, I guess in terms of like relationships with career services, I've definitely spoken to a lot of them about that, and kind of like how we can make sure that it's a two-way thing, and that they can take ownership of it. And then I guess the other thing I would say is just, yeah, sort of their willingness to step out of their comfort zone, because we're promoting a job job that, you know, you're going to have to like step out your comfort zone quite a bit, and making sure that they're kind of eager to do that. And then throughout the journey, you know, we've had a lot of challenges around like reneges. So after people have been made an offer in the last couple of years, so making sure that, you know, people are fully nurtured throughout the journey, and that, yeah, they're making the decision that's right for them, but also that we're doing the best we can to kind of keep the people that we want to are going to do well on the program.
That's interesting you mentioned reneges, because some of the conversations on our employer forums were around reneges, and people, even if they weren't seeing a shift in the numbers, they were really worried that summer was going to cause people either to have thought differently about where they're going to go, or thinking about, oh, shall I stay in education, or shall I go and travel, because I didn't do that because I didn't have a gap year. Is that something you're starting to see tick up now, or is it kind of okay?
I mean, the vast majority that we get, it's like accepting another job or like uncertainty over the role, and I'm not really sure which one comes first with people, like, so kind of a chicken and egg situation. So yeah, like obviously, you know, we want the right people to start, and if someone self-selects out kind of like with all the knowledge that they need and decides to go and do something else, then that's different. But like, I feel like a lot of people like opt out without having given it full consideration, and I think just making sure that, yeah, the people that they have access to, whether it's their families, their friends, their career services, are like really making sure that they're fully considering all the opportunities available to them. And yeah, natural, like if you're a final year student, that you're applying to multiple things, but yeah, I think just taking into account, like being honest and upfront about it, I think, and yeah, just making sure that we can plan for that from an organisation point of view, and because we'll be planning to like over offer significantly on the basis that of the renege rate that we've had in the last couple of years.
Thanks, Greg. And back to you, Karen.
Sorry, Stephen. I think there's another point here that I found certainly in my Deloitte days, is that recruitment campaigns are much longer than they've ever been. So, you know, in let's say the olden days, you know, big employers would have done their recruitment by January, and then so students knew whether they had an offer or not. But actually now people are recruiting all year long. And I think I found that there's more opportunity to renege, because there's still a likelihood that you can get another role in June or July where you wouldn't have done so much in previous years. So I think that is making it more challenging for employers, because that window is much longer than it's ever been.
I think particularly this year, a lot of people stayed open later as well, because they didn't necessarily have the application numbers at the earlier stage that they wanted.
Yeah,
definitely. And Deloitte was the case. I mean, we were open all year when we wouldn't have been in previous years.
That's really interesting you both say that, actually, because again, that's a common theme on the employer forums that we run, which is, and also it's come through in some of our development survey data as well, actually, which is that as the pace of change within the working environment, although that sounds a bit of a cliche, is much quicker, actually the business wants recruiters to be more responsive to targets, and is really struggling more than ever to kind of forecast a year in advance. So we're getting lots of people asking about, so who does year-round recruitment, who does kind of, you know, monthly or bi-monthly intakes and all, and it's a very different way of thinking if your structure is a once a year intake.
Yeah, it's a really good point there about some multiple intakes. We've definitely found that more and more 2, 3, 4 intakes, whereas before there would have been 1. So again, that impacts reneges as well. People accept maybe a later start date and actually suddenly then get an offer for September, so then they're going to decline it at the last minute. So there's lots of competing factors.
Yeah. And I think one of the comments that I heard, which is, that's great if you've got a very, very powerful brand and maybe a high salary. I won't name any names of employers because they're not on this webinar, but that might help if you're kind of doing, if you're expecting people to join 18 months down the line, but actually if you're not quite in that space, it might be a challenge. Just think I was going to ask you the same as talking to Maria, Karen, actually just around those, are there any particular challenges that you're seeing that are a bit different to Maria's, or is it broadly the same? How are you finding it connecting with students at the moment?
We haven't started yet in LNG, so I can't answer that question exactly, but I think it is going to be the points that Maria made around them being ready for us, because we want to move to on-campus approach again for certainly for a number of our universities. Our business obviously haven't been out for a number of years, so I think they've got quite high expectations on how ready the students are going to be, but actually we need to do some education there. But the students do need to be sort of seize that moment and be ready to have those conversations. And I think that is, and I've talked to a couple of career services and they've got concerns as well. So I think that, I guess, to get the business back on campus, I want it to be meaningful for them. I think that I want them to get a really good feel for it, really good, it was really worth my time taking away from the desk. And of course, those relationships are going to take time to build, but I guess I want them to see people and have meaningful conversations. So I hope that is better than maybe I expect, but nothing else I'd say from the ordinary just yet. Early days for us, so.
Thanks. Yeah. Karen, is it something at LNG you think about the in-curriculum piece? Because that's something, and again, looking at some of the questions that are starting to come through, is that something that an organisation like yours has the time and the resources to do? Because I know, again, it's one of the piece of work we did recently showed that actually there's a big chunk of employers just don't have the time to do that in-curriculum stuff and about those relationships. I wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I would say that's true in our case. We haven't got the time or the resource, but we need to, and that is part of my strategy I'm working on, is to map something out, because there's an expectation it's happening, but actually you start digging in, it's not really happening, pockets here and there, but there's nothing consistent, no consistent learning or experience. So yeah, that's a big piece of work for us to work on, but we're not set up at the moment to fully support that.
Chris, just sort of bringing you back into the conversation, that whole range of things we've just sort of spoken about for the last sort of 10 minutes or so, is that something that you recognise? Because obviously you've got a very broad base of both university clients, but also employer clients, all those challenges, those issues around growth. Is that something that you hear on a day-to-day basis?
Yep, I would completely echo what the guys have said. Very much so. I was just scrolling through some of the Q&A here, because I think there's some other great questions as well that we hopefully will have time to address. But yeah, I would only, our conversations at Handshake are with lots of employer partners. Specifically myself, I focus more on that side. Yeah, I'd echo the challenges that Karen and Maria have mentioned.
Okay, let's get into some of these questions. A good, nice little segue there, Chris. So I'll start scrolling through. So we've got plenty of time. So if you've got any questions for Chris or for me or Karen, then please drop them into the Q&A piece. So we covered Kate's question, and Maria, I sort of covered this a bit with Karen, but Maria, I wonder if you had a view on a question that I've had from Jane around actually that better relationships with careers advice services that came through in the research. What does that look and feel like to you? Is it something that you particularly want to work on?
Yeah. So hi Jane. I actually think that we have quite good relationships with career services in my team. We have relationship recruitment is at the forefront of everything that we do, and we actually ran a career service day last week, where we invited the career services down to London. We had about 20 of them there to kind of hear more about the programme and sort of the challenges that we're experiencing, and kind of collaborate on what we can do to reach more students. So they seem to love that kind of stuff. So I would definitely encourage organisations to do that if they can. For us, it's quite a different sell. So we always want to make sure that they fully understand what it is that we offer, and also that we want to reach out to a broad range of students, because I think initially when we kind of reach out to career services, they sort of say, oh, okay, great, we'll set something up with the criminology students, and as great as they can be, we're well, they're going to find us anyway if they're interested in this. We want to spend our resource and our time reaching out to people who wouldn't ordinarily find us, or Google search how to become a prison officer. So I think that's what it looks like for us, is just having people at the career service who really get who we are and who are on the lookout for various opportunities at different events and things that we can be involved with. And I think it makes such a huge difference when my team just have that one point of contact that they can build that relationship with at the career service, which is kind of how we operate throughout the year.
Chris, do you have a view on that? Of course, this 2032 piece of work has, it's been a very big piece of work throughout this year, and also there were lots of round tables and stuff involved, etc. And do you have a sort of a broader view on what that means? That better relationship with the careers and with the careers advisory service, that whole employer HE integration piece.
I think it's a really interesting question. I know that it's a priority of employers. How it actually plays out, I think my exposure to it personally, via Handshake is utilizing Handshake and the partnerships that we can facilitate. I'm less personally attached to the career services side. So I probably don't have a really great answer for you, Stephen, on that one. But I know that it's important, and I know that lots of the employers that we do speak to, be it global employers, they really do want to form stronger relationships. So it's a priority. How we make it happen, Handshake can facilitate that in some respects, but that's all I've got.
Sure. Yeah. I think part of
I
it
always
also is
advocate. My main thing, which I've been doing for the last, well, from when I started in graduate recruitment about 10 years ago, or whenever it was, just bring chocolates to the career service. It's not hard. Like anytime I went to Oxford, I brought a box of chocolates to the career service, and I was inundated with information about what was going on. So I'm telling you, it's worth it.
invest in chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah. Always a good price. Mind you, in this heat, that does make me think of something slightly different when it comes to chocolate. So that's when we think about the autumn, when we'll probably be worrying about freezing temperatures, not boiling temperatures. Yeah, much more so. Excellent. The other thing I was going to say, actually, and also I think one of the things is campus by campus strategies, and that's one of the things that we pick up in our employer conversations. You know, every campus is different. So I think employers that treat campuses like kind of like a homogenous thing don't necessarily do quite so well if you're creating those relationships, which does take time and effort. Right, let's keep going on the questions. So I've got a really interesting one here from Elliot, which is around this diversity piece, and diversity being top of the polls. And I should say, I think this is a consistent piece of information because we see it in our data. I've seen it in previous data around it being a top priority. But I can understand actually that concern, which I think is what you're getting at, Elliot, which is around, if it is the top priority, actually is that genuinely true? Because I do think it is combined with this fact that at the end of the day, we've got people have targets to fill, and so there's the operational piece as well. So I don't know, Maria and Karen, if you wanted to expand a bit on that a little bit around that interplay of the diversity targets and the recruitment targets, and actually, you know, is that picture that I'm portraying as the two are absolutely combined, both need to be delivered at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience at Deloitte and at NG, I would say is absolutely true. Haven't got one without the other, and every hiring decision is made very, very carefully based on, the candidate's performance. And it's not just, even with huge targets that we had at Deloitte, it was never about just filling the roles. It was about filling the roles with the right mix of candidates. So I've in my experience with the employers I've worked with, they've been very genuine in terms of what they want to do. As I said, my issue is more later down the line, but at the recruitment stage, it is not just about filling the roles. It is about filling the roles with the right candidates.
I mean, I just in general think organisations should be more transparent about what the actual numbers are that they end up recruiting, and I think that would show, I guess, more accountability and stuff. We have to report on our numbers to the government, and it is a big part of our strategy. But yeah, it's very easy to say something's a priority and not follow through on it. So I agree with Elliot. It'd be great to know if what that actually looks like in the end for employers. But yeah, and in terms of getting the right people for the roles, it'd be interesting to know.
This conversation ties into another question that's coming from James and around, is it a whole-in strategy that you have to have? Is it I'm sorry, I'm expanding on your question a little bit, James, or are there very specific things that that work? So if you're going to say, actually, this does work when it comes to it, this is the bit that does work, or is it still actually I'm trying to think about what quite way to put it, but actually there's still a lot of uncertainty around what can deliver those changes to diversity hiring?
I think there's still uncertainty certainly in my world. I guess we're quite a small organisation who's trying to grow now, and we're just looking at lots of different options, but actually we can't do it all, and which ones are going to be most fruitful for us, we don't know yet. So yeah, it is uncertain, and we'll have to see how the next year goes, and obviously with how students react to the different interventions that we do, we'll have to wait and see whilst being proactive at the same time. But I think it's going to be challenging this year. It's going to be another different year, as we keep on saying, but another different year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is unclear exactly what the sort of silver bullet is in order to sort of improve that. But I definitely think for more marginalized groups or underrepresented groups, like, you know, it's about access and sort of being able to like get in front of them. And like, so I do think the return to sort of more face-to-face interaction on campus helps with that. So yeah, hopefully that will make more of an impact, because I think that has had a negative impact in the last couple of years.
I've got a question here from Patrick. So this could probably be a long question. So Patrick's from Guy and St Thomas's. So he's asked, they haven't done any candidate attraction before on campus, so they're getting started from scratch. And you know, obviously, you know, it's a complex thing building a campus attraction strategy. But for both of you, from all your experiences in the industry, is there a good place to start? Is there a kind of a core thing that actually, if you're going to do campus engagement, you've got to get it right first and get on with? I wonder if that's one for you, Maria, particularly with starting from scratch with Unlocked.
Yeah, Patrick, happy to chat. Bring the career service chocolates. My first one. Yeah, and I think just reaching out to them mainly, and like making sure you're getting the right contacts and stuff, and like really just like going and sitting down and like having a chat with them and meeting them face to face, I think makes a huge difference. Getting to know the different departments, using the data. I guess, like, I don't know if you've decided what universities you want to target, but I guess like getting the relevant data in terms of like what you want to focus on in terms of targets to choose the universities that you really want to focus on. And then yeah, I generally sort of started from there, and then kind of made some progress with various different campuses. Yeah, there's still some that we're probably not as like that, yeah, still need to do a lot of work with, but yeah, that would be my main sort of tip.
I think my advice is I guess don't overcommit. Choose maybe a smaller number of campuses that you want to work to than you maybe originally think. Build a really good relationship and a meaningful relationship. I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for career services, but it's got to be a two-way process, and it can't just be turning up in September, October when we need them and disappearing out. Like, I'd say smaller number, but invest more, and then you can sort of build on that model in following years. But I in my personal experience, scattergun approach doesn't really work that well. And I think to Maria's point, build meaningful relationships, bring that chocolate, but be that face, but be consistent. And so yes, I'd say start with small rather than go everywhere.
Yes, agreed. So a question from James, talking about, and this is something actually we're thinking about as well at the ISE, which I know Maria and Karen, you'll know from our board conversations. James' specific question actually is graduate roles consider things like returnships, looking at changing the job changer market, and I know, and I'm particularly interested in this because actually is there a broader way of thinking around, you know, when you're recruiting for potential, you know, rather than necessarily coming straight out of a traditional, you know, 3-year degree straight after school? It's interesting that when the age legislation changed, so you couldn't say sort of recent graduates, there was a lot of talk around actually older, more mature students, and that sort of dissipated over the years. So I don't know, is that something that Karen and Maria, you're starting to think about in terms of actually your hiring? In terms of your hiring strategies?
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, go on, Karen.
I was just going to say, just getting my Deloitte hat, they've created a small team this year to look at second job returners, different sort of profile of candidates they might not have looked at in previous years. So I think it's only days of that team, but they definitely put, I think, 3 people on that team to look at that exactly. There's a whole group of candidates who we might have missed in previous years. So I do think people are starting to think about how else we can tap into great talent. Sorry, Maria.
No, yeah, it's always been part of our sort of like strategy, sort of tapping into the career change market. They're obviously a bit harder to find, but yeah, we definitely do some targeted advertising and sort of marketing materials towards those groups. We have about 45% of our applicants are from like final year students, and then another like 30% are people who are just 1 year out, so it is quite skewed. But then the other sort of 25% is generally people who are like kind of beyond, and yeah, either recent graduate or career changes. So yeah, I feel like, yeah, I'm always interested in terms of what people do to like really target those groups, because yeah, like there's yeah, they're much harder to find.
Chris, I'm conscious we covered a lot of ground, and actually I've not put a sort of question your way. I'm just wondering if generally, if any of the themes that we've been talking about over the last 2 or 3 questions, or anything that resonates with you particularly, or anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in the stream of diversity, I would say, 90+% of the employer partners that we have will be using Handshake in some respect to specifically target and engage and build relationships with students and candidates from underrepresented groups. We have this information because we partner directly with the universities. We have a lot of self-identification around gender, ethnicity, whatever it might be. So it's absolutely a theme. We support businesses on trying to hit. I know there was a few questions in there around metrics and numbers. Handshake absolutely helps businesses try and engage with those types of students. So I can only kind of confirm what the guys here have said, that it's really, really important and it's top of mind.
Thanks, Chris. I'm conscious of time. One of the areas that we haven't talked about too much that's come up on the questions is actually the selection and assessment side of things. We talked very much about traction and hiring targets, etc. But actually, the pandemic, from when I look at the data, seems to have shifted more stuff, more technology use up front in the selection process, and then also, of course, people using doing assessment centers online, which is something that almost nobody did prior to the pandemic. So I was wondering actually just how you saw that playing out over the next year or so as people do return to campus. There is that face-to-face. I wonder if market pressures might mean that actually might be more efficient to do it online, but actually if you're going to build a relationship, you've got to do it face-to-face. So I wondered, I'll start with you, Maria, if you've got any thoughts on that and how your actual selection processes might adapt to what's going to stick from the pandemic and what's going to change back.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we ran online video interviews as part of the process pre-pandemic anyway, so they are going to stay as a stage, but next year we're going to run about a quarter of our assessment centres in person, so going to offer people, because we realise that there are advantages to people of having them online, but yeah, we're going to run some in person as well, just because we think it just makes such a difference in terms of engagement with the brand, like, commitment and sort of motivation. And yeah, want to be able to give people that option. So that'll be fun, making sure it's the same experience online as it is in person. And also, obviously, like I said before, the job that we're recruiting for is not a job that you can do sitting behind a screen. So I think it's really important that we sort of try to move back to doing them in person if we can.
Karen, what are your thoughts on that subject?
I think very similar. I mean, our first two stages have been online and will remain online for the foreseeable future. In terms of final stage, I think it will depend on the types of role, and I think in particular, apprentices we will do face-to-face, and for the grad roles and interns, I think it will depend on some of the business areas. So I'd say it's a hybrid approach. There's pros and cons from both, from a business side and also a candidate side. But I think our apprentices, our aim is to do that face-to-face.
What do you think candidates want, Karen? Do you think they want to come back face-to-face? Is there anything in some of these sort of thoughts and some of the comments we've had in the question that candidates maybe they're used to being online? Totally separate, but sorry, go on.
I hear mixed things. Some candidates are desperate to come in, and some actually feel more comfortable doing it online. So I think it depends on you, your temperament, how much knowledge you have about an organisation, how confident you feel. So I think it's, from what I'm hearing, but I'd love to hear more from others, it suits some and less others. I think the one thing that we would want to do is, even if for where we remain online, is do a keep warm face-to-face. So making sure they come into the office before they start, and quite close to the offer stage to get that, I guess, a bit more commitment. I think just a bit more engagement. So that there's definitely needs to be a face-to-face at some point in their recruitment, in their hiring journey.
My understanding from people who've offered both is that about 25% opt to do it in person. So that's the sort of balance that we're going for.
It's interesting. Yeah. This is kind of it's a bit of a side comment. Nicola, who some of you will know heads up our research, she was at Glastonbury, and she used to work on the I think mental health desk they had there, and she said actually the number of under 20-year-olds who left Glastonbury early because they couldn't cope with the volume of people, they just weren't used to being in that environment. I thought was quite interesting. That's not the same as what what will happen in an assessment process, but I do wonder if there's something in that around behaviours and having to change back, and people being a bit more comfortable with the face-to-face side of things. Again, I think we've probably got time for one more question, then we'll do a quick wrap up. So a question here around actually from a university that might be smaller or may not be on your targets. How does a university sort of get your attention? Because I think one of the things that actually we sometimes fail to recognise in the UK compared to other markets around the world, which is the fact that most employers don't really care what somebody studies. I mean, that actually where you spend your marketing and attraction budgets isn't actually doesn't dictate which students can or can't apply to your positions, which is quite different in other territories. So any advice for career services in general that want to work with yourselves around actually and what they can do to help you deliver what you need to do?
I think where there's like where employers have got locations throughout the UK, like obviously try and build a local, quote unquote, local relationship with that office. I mean, I think I found, again, with that Deloitte, 14 locations, and actually we built some really good relationships with universities in that town or near about. So it doesn't always have to be like the London head office, quote unquote. I think that's important. And I think maybe, I guess because we've been talking about diversity quite a lot, but actually being, where you can share the makeup of your students with try and get contact through LinkedIn, and then try and put in a call, share that information. I guess it is building a personal relationship, but I think it's sort of just one by one. I think the mass emails don't work out, but yeah, I think trying to find someone in the early careers team, and maybe not the head, actually someone else who's got maybe a bit more time. But I guess where there's a local office, I think that really is a great place to start.
Okay, thanks, man. That's very good advice. Maria, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, get in touch. And yeah, I think someone also asked about how we decide on universities that we target. And obviously, like for us, from our perspective, we're a relatively small team. So mostly it's down to kind of resource, like based on the data in terms of like where's brand awareness, like where are we getting successful applications, but like always open to kind of like discussing things that we could potentially do with other universities. But yeah, for us, it's normally a sort of resource capacity thing, but yeah, no reason why someone can get in touch and we could take it from there.
And that's interesting points on the data. Actually, I've often thought that actually with the widening participation emphasis within universities, their own diversity challenge and strategies, actually there's something around using data to connect students. There's somewhere where what universities are doing and what employers are looking to do, they meet, and I don't think we've quite got that, got those connections right yet. Maybe it's because teams are in different places, all that kind of stuff. But there's something in students knowing where students are and data that might be my input to that as well. Karen, Maria, we've covered an awful lot of ground. Really, thank you for sharing and being very candid about all your thoughts and all what's happening with your organisations. I think you both deserve a box of chocolates as well. So, but Chris, it's been a real pleasure to work with you guys so closely on all this. Is there anything out of all that we covered you think that you think we've missed, or something that we need to be thinking about as we sort of take our thought process and work forward?
I appreciate it, Stephen. Thank you very much. No, I think we've had a really interesting and great conversation today. I think we've covered off, the university priorities when it comes to some of these challenges. I think we obviously dove deep into the employer report and what challenges our employers are facing. So, yeah, from my point of view, it's a really interesting conversation to hear some of the challenges. Obviously on hand, if anyone wants to discuss anything with regards to the university side of Handshake or the employer side. So yeah, feel free to get in touch. I appreciate everyone for listening. Thank you very much.
Smashing. Okay, so thanks again, Karen, Maria and Chris. Really informative session, very much appreciated. So what's left for me really to say is thanks for participating. As I said, we will record it, so you will get a copy of that recording. So if you want to go back and revisit anything that you might have missed, or want to go into a bit more detail, or please do share it, as we're always keen to share our learnings amongst our audience. And really thanks again to our panelists for taking the time out of their busy days. Hope you have a great summer. The weather does seem to be cooling off a little bit. I'm flying over to Greece tomorrow, so all the best to whatever you're doing over the summer. Have a great summer, and look forward to talking to you again when we do our next webinars, which will pick up towards the end of August and into September. And thanks again, Chris, for the support of Handshake. Thank you very much.